Morning, everybody. Crappy back to work on a sunny day, Mondays. Welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's Northeast reporter, Jeremy Armstrong. Morning, Jeremy.
Good morning.
Now, we're a bit late this morning. We've had some technical issues. An overheating laptop for our producer has meant that it's currently resting on a bag of frozen M&S chips. You've heard of computer chips. This is what we're using today to try and keep this show on the road. If suddenly we freeze, it's because the chips have thawed out. So let's see how quickly we can get through this and get those chips back in the freezer. Now, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on an extraordinary allegation which came out in an interview with the former chairman of Prince Harry's AIDS charity, that the royal tried to cash in on the foundation he had set up. More on that in a bit, but first I want to take us to page 14, where another do-gooder has also got himself in some hot water. Now, Jeremy, this is your story. This time it's the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who's been at it again. First off, can you remind us why he's a former Archbishop?
Indeed, yeah. Obviously made some very grave errors, I suppose, really, in his handling of the abuse scandals surrounding a guy called John Smythe, who was a QC who used his position with basically getting access to children from private schools, and is reckoned to be the worst abuser associated with the Church of England. And he decided to give an interview as almost a kind of part and shot, I guess, in a way, but certainly his intention, at least, was to try and draw a line under what had happened post his being forced out of office. And rather than drawing a line under it, I'm afraid it's kind of reignited the whole row.
Oh, God. So John Smythe, anyone who's been living under a rock, is someone who was operating in the Church of England at camps and so on, summer camps for young people who are sort of intended for the priesthood, some of whom actually went into politics in the end, and who was apparently would take young boys away somewhere private and would beat them quite hard and sort of groom them and get them to come back again in return for more beatings, tell them this is all what Jesus wanted and so on and so forth. Now, when this all came out, Justin Welby didn't deal with it very well, if at all. He had known Smythe apparently at the time, but he says that wasn't a big connection. So what's today's story about, Jeremy? What's he said now? How can you actually make that worse? Someone is beating and hurting children over a long period of time and saying it's what Jesus wants. This comes to you as Archbishop of Canterbury, head of the Church of England, well, not head, but, you know, prelate of the Church of England, and you don't do anything about it. This guy then dies without the victims having any kind of justice because you haven't acted. How can he make that worse?
I mean, it seems difficult to contemplate in a sense, but he has, because he was saying that he didn't react to it because there were so many allegations which were coming in simultaneously. Now, the problem with that argument, as you've just pointed out, is that, you know, he was the worst by quite a considerable distance in terms of the number of offences, and I don't think that you know, regardless of how many complaints are being made simultaneously, I don't think that really holds water. And there's this terrible feeling with the Church of England that they're ignoring rather than acting upon complaints in order to hope that somehow it's going to go away, you know. And obviously with him, that was the last thing he should have done because of the scale of it, because of the sheer scale of his offending.
He's sort of implying by saying there's a lot of it that it just sort of slipped through his fingers, I suppose.
That's essentially what he's saying. He's saying it's not an excuse, but they are the mitigating factors that he's given. So that's never really going to work. I mean, to be fair, he did issue a complete apology to all the victims and said that he let them down. So one has to acknowledge that. And also, there's also that thing about forgiveness. You know, when you analyse his role in the church, I guess you may contend it would be no surprise that someone would express that, but it just feels deeply inappropriate in this context, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, what do you feel, everybody, about Justin Welby and his? I suppose it is an excuse, really, for why there was nothing done about John Smythe before he died. And of course, when he left Britain, he went to ministry in Africa, and he was still doing the same thing there after his allegations, which Welby had been aware of, and other people were hurt. And in fact, one person died later on. Smythe's family have rejected all this stuff pretty much, but it's pretty much established fact. How have the survivors reacted to this, Jeremy? I mean, the headline there is about how he could forgive Smythe if he were still here. But he does sort of say in the copy, you know, it's not really up to me, it's up to the survivors to decide that. But he's obviously said something very odd.
Again, a couple of the victims were one made a statement on Twitter, actually, because he's now an author. The other was talking to the BBC anonymously, and they're basically saying just exactly that, really, that one of them actually met Mr. Welby, and Mr. Welby was given the opportunity to, you know, to apologise to him personally, and he didn't, and he seemed a bit more wrapped up in his own situation. And you know, he does accept, actually, and acknowledge that, for example, his statement in the House of Lords, where for some reason, known only to himself, he made light about, you know, the fact his secretary had arranged all these things for him, and now he was resigning, which, again, any kind of levity in that context is just completely inappropriate, isn't it? And you know, you can imagine how you would feel if you were a victim in that context. You know, somebody making a joke about it. It was a car crash.
Yeah, the whole thing's been disastrous. He doesn't appear to be making it any better. But what do you think, everyone? Do you think that you know, there's anything that the former Archbishop could do at this point to improve things? Perhaps cooperating with any kind of investigation, meeting some victims again, maybe with a bit more depth. Who knows? We still don't have an Archbishop of Canterbury at the moment to replace him. Is there anything you think, Jeremy, that he can do to improve this situation for everybody? Like maybe stop talking or something?
I think that's his intention, isn't it? I think he's also saying in this that he wants to now completely withdraw, and he wants to focus on reconciliation, as he termed it, potentially may come back to the pulpit at some stage, but basically he's saying he wants to withdraw from his public role, and I think maybe, candidly, that is the best option, really. It's going to be a very, very difficult job for a successor to try and address the kind of errors that he's made, I think.
Yeah, it's all a bit of a mess, and it's not very pleasant. But you know, hopefully he was asked to take some personal responsibility, wasn't he? It was kind of forced on him in a way that you must be responsible for this, and that's why he resigned. And I suppose, in a sense, he's trying to still wrestle with that sense of personal responsibility while at the same time not really feeling it. It's a bit odd, but we need to move on to the main story of the day, which is someone else who's being asked to take personal responsibility for things. And there's quite a few of them, actually. Last week, there was yet more drama involving Prince Harry, just for a change, in which, after he and a fellow prince from Lesotho in Southern Africa, both resigned from a charity that they had set up. Now, it was called Sentabali in honour of both their mothers who had died young. It means forget-me-not, and it was aimed at alleviating the effects of HIV and AIDS in Lesotho communities. And Lesotho, of course, is where Prince Harry spent his gap year, and the charity he founded was sort of seen as, indeed he said it was, a lifelong commitment. He was in it for the long term, and he was going to make a big difference in this sort of very small areas, focus his tensions there. Now, Jeremy, there's some stuff to dig into in this one. First of all, can you tell us sort of why he's resigned?
Well, the former charity boss was basically saying that the central issue, if one can put it that way, was regarding this charity polo game that they had, and he had announced that he was going to bring Netflix along while doing the documentary. And the problem with that, of course, is there's a conflict with using the charity for a commercial gain is essentially the argument. And also, one has to take into account that all these people who are going along to the charity match, thinking they're going along to support a charity, when the Netflix cameras turn up, you do have real issues there in terms of, do they want to take part? Are they comfortable with it? You know, and you are using the charity for commercial reasons. I think that's the central allegation that was made by Sophie Chandauka, she's called, the doctor who was also on the board of the charity and was involved in organising it and running it. There's no question whatsoever that there's a conflict. There's a conflict there, isn't it? There's clearly been a personality clash of some description between the two of them, and unfortunately, that has completely, ruined this event, and also it looks like ruled him out of this this charity fundraising role for the future, which is if you take a step back and analyse that, that's just a real shame for the people who are going to benefit from the fundraising of the charity, really.
Yeah, it's huge dramatic things causing lots of headlines. I think our producers Chips have probably thought out, which is why the strap for the previous story is still on the bottom. And if Prince Harry, anyone's tuning in now, this strap isn't about Prince Harry, okay? It's because the producer's computer's overheated and she's gone to get a bag of peas. Now, as a result of this fallout, then you've had the trustees, which is Prince Harry, the other prince, some of their friends, and then the chairman of trustees, who's Dr. Sophie Chandorkar, who's sort of in charge of running some of the stuff day to day. Now, she's a former lawyer. Things seem to have become untenable between those groups of people. The trustees asked her to resign. She refused. They then called a meeting in which they were plainly going to force her out. She then apparently filed a High Court motion asking that meeting not to be held. It never did get held because all the trustees resigned en masse instead. And they've put out a public statement explaining it was to do with this breakdown in trust between the princes and their friends and Dr. Sophie. But she hasn't reacted terribly well to all that. She's clearly not going to go quietly. She gave an interview over the weekend to Trevor Phillips, in which she said, he made it clear she had plenty to say about what the trustees have been up to and how the thing was run. One of them was this allegation about Prince Harry's Netflix show, wasn't it, specifically? So one of the ways that Centre Barley raised a lot of money was polo matches and charity polo matches, and people would pay up to, get this, £75,000 in order to play polo with Prince Harry. I'd pay that much not to have to play polo with Prince Harry. But lots of people decided that was a good thing to do. And it was one of the principal fundraisers for the charity. They had one set up. Here we go. We've managed to change the strap. Bag of peas for the win. Well done. Thank you, Evan. So they had this match set up. It was all going to go ahead. Someone had donated, I think, a pitch, Jeremy, for free or for very little money because it was a charitable event. But then what happened after that?
Yeah, well, there is this problem, as we've said at the outset, of it, use of it for a commercial reason, and obviously the charity were put at the centre of it. The people who were providing the pitch were then unhappy with the fact that it was going to be used for commercial reasons. That obviously everyone's seen about the figures of $100 million or whatever this deal is with the Sussex. It's and they then said they were going to charge a fee in order to use the pitch, and so that put the game in jeopardy. And the whole thing really, in a way, what I find interesting about it, apart from the personal issues between the main protagonists here and the fact that she's gone public with it, obviously knowing that it was going to be explosive, there's no doubt about it. She's really kind of made this decision, hasn't she, knowing that it was going to be horrendous in terms of publicity for the Sussexes. So there's clearly a real personal antipathy there. But you take a step back and you look at Prince Harry's role in life. This is the real kind of irony I think about this story, that you've got someone who doesn't want to be a member of the royal family, but really what he is using is his profile as a member of the royal family in order to do his day-to-day work in a way, and that's the key issue here, isn't it? He wants to be filmed for a documentary. That's how he makes his money, but it impinges on his in this particular context anyway, his desire to do good, his desire to raise money for this charity, and it sums up the difficulty he has in his future role, I think.
Yeah. Now, Richard says, in most things, Sussex, Harry has made his bed and now has to lie in it. I respect that he has, but he comes across as very needy when it comes to sustaining the pair of them. Royals do need reforming. And what you were just saying there, Jeremy, I mean, obviously he set up this charity when he was royal. And Steve says, eat polos, yes, play polo, no thanks, not for 70. But the fact is he set up this charity when he was royal, when it is possible to use that to raise money for things. And you don't need money to live on yourself because there are palaces and governments and kings and people. They'll be fine. It'll be okay. You've also got all that security protection that no one has to pay for apart from the taxpayers. It's easy. Once you go outside the royal sort of hole, whatever you want to call it, cage, you start having to pay for that stuff yourself. You have to buy your own home. You have to service your own mortgage. You have to pay for your own security, which is really expensive stuff. Or you forego all that and just try to be a normal person going down Lidl, which isn't going to work if you're Prince Harry, I suspect. Italian Wolverine, possibly not his real name, says, I wouldn't say he's a bully, just a control freak. We don't really know some of the details going on there because Prince Harry hasn't said anything to respond to Dr. Sophie's allegations, and they are just allegations at the moment. But, some might say, Jeremy, what's the problem? There's a charity doing good things. A polo match is raising money for the charity. Such things are televised all the time. Tracy here says, leave Harry alone. The fact is, I suppose it was this last minute thing and the conflict of interest, isn't it, between the two?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, the answer would have been really, wouldn't it, that a donation was made by Netflix or Harry, or they provided some kind of fee in order to film. That would have been the most benign way, I think, of dealing with that. And then one would assume that the conflict is lost to a certain extent because they're paying for it.
Yeah.
And so then there's also this thing with Meghan then turning up and other celebrities coming along with Meghan, and obviously they're doing that for the show, and you do have that terrible feeling of is she saying? I think the key issue that she's raising, which is the charity being used in order to promote the Netflix show. You can't argue about that, really. I think there is a genuine conflict there, and the answer, as I say, would have been for them to either pay for the pitch or make some sort of contribution to the charity in order to try and square that particular circle. That's the only way I could see of solving that. But you have to say there is some justification for a complaint, isn't there? Really, particularly if it's last minute. I mean, if you say a year in advance we're going to film it, fair enough, and you can tell all the people who are involved, you can explain it to them, you can ask them if they consent to taking part in it as part of the fundraiser. If you are doing that at the last minute, as she's suggesting, then you're just going to turn up with a camera crew as well. There are issues there, aren't there? You've got to ask the people who are taking part whether they want to be filmed or not. I mean, it's a fairly basic thing, that, really. And most people, I would suggest most people in that context probably would consent, but you still need to do that in advance, and in order to do it properly, I suppose, is the argument.
Yeah, there's a bit of consideration and think about people outside your personal bubble, whatever. And obviously, Harry's bubble is pretty bulletproof, I think. What do you think, everybody? Do you think Harry's done the right thing in resigning? Do you think that he should find a way back into the charity? Do you think that he should never have tried to, connect the charity and the business side of things at the same time? I suspect the reason that Netflix weren't going to make a donation necessarily, it wasn't suggested for that filming that match, was because they'd already paid Harry £100 million, and they thought that was quite enough for a fairly rubbish documentary about polo.
I mean, if those figures are true, they are absolutely extraordinary. You've got to say, haven't you? That, I mean, and then you get back to why doesn't Harry just make a contribution?
Exactly. Steve said a couple of privileged people having a spat, and it's the charity that suffers. Yes. Now, there are legal duties. This is the fundamental thing. If you are a trustee of a charity or the chairman, you take no salary. You're not allowed to benefit from it personally. If there is a conflict of interest with a business venture, you're supposed to declare that, and it should really be avoided at all costs. Let Netflix film a different polo match. This one is for charity, kind of thing. And that is all set down in legislation. You can't really argue with it too much. And it seems like from Dr. Sophie's interview that she's had some issues with governance generally of the charity and the way it's been run. She's now being looked into by the Charity Commission. We don't know quite what all the details, those allegations are, but these things take forever. And the Charity Commission usually just comes back and says, well, behave better. And there's never any real action taken. Is it fair to say, though, Jeremy, overall, just from reading the stuff that we know about these allegations at the moment, it basically seems like Prince Harry's kind of being accused of treating this charity as a kind of personal fiefdom, and she sees it, and she does say that some of this is, as a black woman, she's felt treated differently. She sees this as a kind of colonial, white prince running the roost over people, and that's probably perhaps some of the root of the objections they've all had between them. But because he was founder, his mates were the trustees, he felt he could do whatever he liked, and then they've recruited this woman as the chairman, and she's put her foot down, and there's been
that's it. That's exactly what's happened, isn't it? There's no two ways about it. And she said that she's got problems with it being used in that way, and it's a shame it's gone public because of the damage to the charity, in my humble opinion. Because ultimately, all that the people who lose out are the people who need the money the most, aren't they? Very vulnerable people who are dealing with the aftermath of the AIDS epidemic. That was the whole reason it was set up. So, big picture, actually, it's all a bit trivial, really, and they're the ones who are going to lose out. And that's that for me is the really sad thing about it.
Yeah,
he's trying to do something altruistic, and it's been thrown into this terrible public focus. Because of this personal spat, and really, in that regard, I would say there's a kind of culpability on both sides, because she must know that this is going to create terrible publicity. And really, when you take a step back and think about what has it achieved overall, the answer is not a great deal, really, isn't it? It's just,
It does make you wonder.
More mudslinging.
It makes you wonder about the kind of the character assessments that they made at the start when they recruited Sophie's German. You thought this was going to be fine. You didn't think there was going to be a clash in any way. She said that one of the issues was that almost like the trustees were behaving as though, oh no, the Africans are taking over the charity. And her argument is, well, that's much better, isn't it? Now, Centre Bali is still operating. It's delivering food and so on to HIV and AIDS victims in Soto, but it's not quite clear where or how it's going to be able to fundraise in the future. So she has vowed that Centre Bali is going to continue. It's still in operation, but it's hard to see how it's going to fundraise when, without Prince Harry's polo matches, number one, you don't have the cachet of a royal or semi-royal, whatever it might be. And, we've got a global controversy. Donors are going to steer clear organizations like that. Somebody, it's called 800X, says, according to a 2021 Forbes report, the family's total net worth was approximately 28 billion. I think that's the royal family you're talking about, probably. Yet they're trying to use charities as fundraisers. It's a disgrace. Of course, Harry is no longer connected to anything that the royals are supposedly worth. And to be frank, that 28 billion doesn't take into account that they, their homes and so on don't belong to them, usually. Some of them do. Most of them don't. They're ours, and as is all the gold, frankly. But, of course, they get to play with it. I don't think 28 billion is quite right anyway. So Harry's been totally stum. It's just how do your journalistic instincts, Jeremy, tell you what's going to happen next? Do you think Harry's likely to stay stum? Is he going to go on and set up some other kind of charity? Can he, if he doesn't have the same cachet? What's going to happen to his philanthropy now?
Yeah. If you take a step back and analyze it, most people are going to think, well, do we really want to be associated with that? That's the problem. And in this particular context, he had control of it. He's lost control really from someone who's invested in it and is saying, I don't agree with what you're going to do, and I agree with the kind of it being used as a personal fiefdom almost. That clearly is the case, isn't it? So that's where the conflicts come into play. And big picture, if you take a step back, if that's what happens in terms of his philanthropy, then again, you've got to say people are prepared to pay 75 grand to play polo with him. The people who are going to benefit from that 75 grand again are the people who lose out. And there's a certain sadness about it all, really, in that regard, I think.
Yeah, there's also people that are going to pay the price for it. And I think it all boils down, same with Justin Welby and John Smythe, being poor judge of character, I think, and perhaps showing a bit of poor character yourself when it all comes down to the point of judgment, which is where we seem to be at. Now, that's all a bit grim, but we have managed to find some good news in the world for you. Let's try and whistle through this before the peas melt too. Here it is. So there's several stories we discussed today about what goes horribly wrong when people are called on to take personal responsibility. But a lady called Camilla Hempelman-Adams did not let that put her off volunteering for the same herself. Now, the daughter of adventurer David Hempelman-Adams, it's clearly in the blood, she has just completed the first female solo traverse of Baffin Island in Canada. Now, if that sounds to you like a light stroll watching the birds, she endured temperatures of -40, winds of 47 miles an hour, and spent 2 weeks trekking on skis over 150 miles. She still came in a day early, all right? Earlier than expected. Jeremy, do you think, is this proof that sometimes the only person you can rely on, laptops aside, the only person you can rely on really is yourself?
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I love it. It's a great story, and I love the fact that her dad's an explorer and she's become an explorer as well, as we discussed before the programme. Sounds like 2 weeks in Gateshead, actually, to be honest. That's obviously where she's done. That's obviously where she's done her training. But -40, and what always strikes me about these things, I don't know if you remember the Billy Connolly documentary when he was by himself and he did the filming. I mean, it's a bit difficult to compare because obviously Billy Connolly I presume had a camera crew of some description with him. So it's not a direct analogy in that regard. But I always remember him talking about the silence and the loneliness and the kind of that feeling of isolation. I can't imagine anything worse, personally, to be honest, than to be kind of stuck in those conditions and wondering how you're going to get through it. And it's an extraordinary story of resilience in that regard. I mean, she came in a day early. It was 13 days, and I guess she must have had utmost confidence in her ability to do it. You know, she's obviously trained for it, and it's in the blood without a shadow of a doubt. But great achievement.
Yeah, it's I think it's the mental resilience as well as the physical toughness that would have been required for that. But I've got a theory that no matter what someone's job is, when they go on holiday, it's always like the opposite of whatever their job is. So if a taxi driver goes on holiday, he'll take a cruise, right? And if a doctor or a journalist goes on holiday, they go where there are no people, right? And no one is going to murder each other or die or have other issues, because they just want to go have a break. It's away from all that, whatever it might be. And so, plainly, maybe she spends too much time with other people the rest of the year, and she just wanted 2 weeks off. I can see the attraction sometimes.
Give it a go. Give it a go. I'm sure you'll enjoy a sledge across the Baffin Island and come back. It'd be a good feature.
You'll only make a feature. That's the trouble. I'll have 2 weeks. That's the trouble. I'll be out there interviewing.
Sorry, I'm defining your life through journalism again. I must
How can I go
now.
out there and not be talking to people about stuff? I don't know. I will. I'll end up interviewing a penguin. Wolverine says, I love how the Mirror do these videos. Well done, guys. Real old-fashioned journalism. Thank you. Whatever your real name is. Let's assume it's Wolverine. Maybe it's the Wolverine. Maybe. Right. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining us. Thank you, Bag of Peas, Eben and her chips, for managing to keep going through this.
We've had our chips, literally, haven't we? Bum bum.
We've had our chips today, yes. Thank you very much for the pan, Jeremy. We will see you again on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda. Come back then, Wolverine. There'll be more of this kind of stuff. Hopefully the laptop will have cooled down by then. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. Until we see you on Wednesday, stay safe. Take care. Tatty bye.